Yeah, g'day YouTubers, Spannerman again here with another video. Hope you enjoyed the video today. Please subscribe to the channel. Any comments, thumbs up. Thanks for watching. Bye for now. Yeah, g'day YouTubers, Spannerman again here with another video. Today we're going to talk about the cutting performance of a chain when it's worn down to something like this. Now you may think that when it wears down to something like this that it doesn't cut very good. Well, you'd be mistaken. It actually cuts, in a lot of cases, it can cut better than a brand new chain. Now you're going to be turning around and saying, oh, why is that? Why would that actually cut better? Well, first of all, if you look at it, it's a little tiny triangle. And if you look at the top plate, brand new, the width of the top plate is approximately about 4.4, 4.5 millimeters. The width of this top plate is 3.9 millimeters, so it's reduced by about 10%, something like that there. And if we were to put a new chain up against it, a tooth against it, you will see the huge difference. So the other thing is, when you look at the big tooth, there's a lot of surface area on there, a lot of friction. When you've got this little tiny triangle, there's not much friction there, very, very little. Also, the raker gauge is filed right down much, much deeper, and we'll get into that in a minute. So what I will do is just zoom out there just to show you that if we're to measure the tooth with a vernier, we get a reading of about 4.3. It varies slightly. If we're to measure this tooth here, a little bit, let me lift it out a little bit easier to measure like that. It's about 4.8. There it is there. So a brand new one can be up to 4.5. This can vary anywhere from about 3.6 to 3.88 like that. There's variation on it. That's nothing. But because this cutting edge is still mainly intact and the width is only about 10% less and there's less friction, it actually cuts extremely well. Now, you may have heard me on other videos turn around and say that you've got to use a progressive depth gauge. You must use a progressive depth gauge because when this strikes timber, very, very easy for it to kick up. As you can see, I barely touch it and it just kicks up because we're behind the pivot point. There's a pivot point there where my fingernail is, or if we're to put a pen there, there's your pivot point right there, and then your tooth is behind that. So it kicks up a lot easier. And if you looked in a lot of the other videos, and I'll demonstrate it again, when teeth hit a log, so the moment this hits a bit of timber, it kicks down like that, and the depth gauge touches the timber. So you have this rocking motion. So all chainsaw chains and the teeth move up and down like this as they travel along cutting the timber. It's this rocking motion. It's just the way it is, because the reason it does it is because all the teeth are on links. It's not fixed like a circular saw. So because they're all got pivot points, when they strike timber, they kick up, and the depth gauge limits the amount that it can cut. So there's actually quite a big distance now from the raker to the tooth, which is approximately about 14 millimeters. So this distance has increased dramatically. The rocking motion is very sensitive now. So therefore, it requires, to work efficiently cutting timber, you have to increase the cutting depth. So the raker must be lowered. The difference is almost double. It's about 1.2 millimeters by the time you get down to the end of the life. And don't use one of these type of depth gauges, because if you use one of these type of constant depth gauges, all they're going to ever do, and we'll see whether you can see this, is only measure, can't see it real good on that tooth. We'll just see if we can see it on another one. You might see it better on this one. Yeah, you might. Yeah, you could. If you actually look at the raker, you'll find out that it's well below the top of the surface there. So I think you can see that if you look here, you can see that the raker's down at least a 0.5 millimetre below the surface. Because this type of raker can only measure 0.65 of a millimetre. That's all it can ever do. And 0.65 of a millimetre is not enough when the chain's worn down to that extent. And that's why you've got a progressive depth gauge, because the progressive depth gauge will change that. So as we wear down, and I think you can see that quite easily. There it is there, hard and soft setting. Ray Carlton invented the progressive depth gauge in about 1963 and put a worldwide patent on it. These steel ones are better than the all the rest out there because they're hardened to 62 Rockwell. You can run the file over the top. Files are only about under 60, around about 60 Rockwell. There's only about 2 difference, but nonetheless, what it means that you'll scratch the depth gauge. It'll be very difficult. It'll last for many years. So don't worry about filing over the top of that. Whereas the Husqvarna ones and some of the others, they're all made out of soft metal and you'll file them away. Why they're not made out of hard metal, I don't know. The Oregon ones are absolute garbage. They never used to be. They used to be hardened. But for some reason now they're all made in China and they're all soft. And if you run a file over the top, you'll grind them away. Now you hear people turn around and say, oh, they're not meant to run the file over. Well, I can tell you right now that if you want to sharpen your chain, and you're putting the depth gauge on there, I only put the depth gauge on once and I run the file over once. If you're putting it off, on, you're going to take 3 times longer to file your chains. It's as simple as that. So, yes, all the professionals will keep this type of gauge on top and file straight over the top. You can sort of video, you can do some YouTube searches on progressive depth gauges. Everyone will do that. All the professionals are doing it that way. So if you're doing it, putting it on, taking it off, putting on, taking it off, you haven't learned how to file chains properly. Simple as that. Anyway, back to this. Because of the less surface area on here, and it's only about 10% thinner, it's only 10% less wider than a brand new chain, it still cuts very efficient. It really does cut good. So my advice to people out there that have very old worn chains, maybe not as bad as this, but getting down to less than half of its life left, I would advise you to use a progressive depth gauge. Look, I guess if you have a look, I haven't been cleaning the gullets very good on here. That one looks a bit better. The only thing that's happened to this, we'll see if we can find one. When you let your chain get down like this, you're liable to break teeth off, and that's happened to this one. One tooth is broken off. There it is there. So if you have a look there, it's broken off. So that's what happens when you start to get down like this. They all start snapping off. Look, I probably could have cleaned the gullets a little bit better than that, but that's good enough. Yeah, I'm not going to be that fussy. It's only a chainsaw chain, so yeah, it's not going to make. That one could definitely have been a little bit cleaner, but it won't have a dramatic effect on the performance, even if it looks a bit like that. Anyway, that's probably about all I've got to say about old chains. That if you do use a progressive depth gauge, you can get a long life out of them, and believe me, a lot of them will cut better than a brand new chain. And I'm sure there's people out there that'll watch this, and some of the older people that have been using chainsaws will confirm that if you do use a progressive depth gauge like this, that you can take your chains right down there and they'll cut as good as a brand new chain, if not better in some situations. Look, thanks for watching. Give us a thumbs up. Bye for now.